Hi, it's Lee from Colouring Queen, and it's time to have a bit of crime chat today while I colour this gorgeous froggy that was given as a freebie by a Polish artist. I can't pronounce her name. I will put a link in the description below, and you can pick it up on her Facebook page. If you love frogs, she actually has a whole little book of them out now, so just check out my new releases post for April and it's right there. Now, I thought I'd use my Inktense pencils today to colour this froggy, and I'll probably go over him in some pencils to cover up any of my usual mistakes out of the lines and general whoopsies from not being able to see properly what I'm colouring. I need to get some new glasses. It's a rainy day in Brisbane today, so lots of rain thrashing about and making a bit of a racket, so I hope you can't hear it through the audio. But I'm actually used to a lot of strange noises from rooms that I'm not even in. And at first I thought it was Buddy walking about, but he's actually sound asleep. And I checked to see if it was Millie, and nope, she's sound asleep as well in her favourite chair. So there's banging against the wall, and I finally went out to investigate. And it's just the bamboo hitting the side of the house. The bamboo has grown to something like 10 meters high, and the amount of rain has actually forced the really high bamboo to lean, and because they're over 10 meters high, they're now leaning against the house. But that's not the only noises that we have around here. For nearly a year now, we've had a lot of weird noises coming from the lower level of our house. And we often don't go down there. It's basically a garage, a workshop, a laundry, a little bit of a kitchenette and a sort of TV, couch, spare bed situation. I really only go there just for the laundry, but David's often in the garage working on some project. So we kept checking the house out for the source of the noises that we heard, and there was a lot of rustling around the walls, scratching noises. It was really disconcerting. And eventually we discovered what it was when we went downstairs one night. There, hanging off the door, was a big bushy possum, a brush-tailed possum. And looking up, he'd brought the whole family along. Mr. Possum, Mrs. Possum, Baby Possum. We really like them. We built them a house to move into, but so far, these uninvited guests have not moved out. And actually, when I walk down there, I knock on the walls and I say, "Hey kids, time to get up." Now, these are not the worst of house guests. The worst house guests are the ones that you don't know that are there. They know you are there, but you have no idea. And colouring this froggy made me think of frogs, and I've actually been rescuing quite a few frogs from the pool lately. And of course, the type of frog that I'm thinking of is not the type that I'm scooping out of the pool or that I'm colouring now. The type of frog I'm thinking of are Phroggers. It's spelt a different way. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard of squatters. Now, these are people that basically take up occupation of an unoccupied property. So when I was at uni, there was talk of a group of students that did this with an abandoned property nearby. So using their combined skills in law and engineering, they searched and found out that the owner was overseas, so no chance of getting discovered anytime soon. The engineers set up water tanks and solar and anything else needed for off-grid home occupation, and it became their home until they were eventually kicked out. But it can be very difficult to remove squatters from your home. And in some places, like Italy, for example, unbelievably problematic. But Phroggers are different from squatters in one aspect. They take up occupation in a property that's already occupied without the occupiers knowing of their existence. In fact, one of my first true crime stories on this channel was about a Phrogger whose only one member of the household knew that he was actually in the home. The other didn't, and it had disastrous results. Now you can click the link on the right-hand side if you want to see that video. They've basically been given this name because they leapfrog from house to house or place to place, like Phroggers. And maybe you've noticed some general uneasiness in your house, floorboards that creak for no reason, pets that stare at the wall or bark for no reason. Things are moved around in your house. Your leftovers has disappeared from the fridge. That last piece of cake that you wanted to eat is gone. These small things are the things that sometimes people may not notice, or if they do, they figure that they just misremembered or they blame a housemate for the general weirdness. Most people don't immediately jump to the conclusion that someone else, unbeknown to them, is living in their house. And that's what Amber Dawn assumed. When Amber Dawn was just 20 in 1995, she moved to Enumclaw in the USA. The name is said to mean he who makes noise, or sometimes the place of evil spirits. It's a small community in Washington. It's bordered by farmland and dairy farms on 3 sides, and it's protected by forest on the eastern side. At the time of this story, the population was less than 12,000 people, and the town was known for its low crime rate and a safe place to live. The small town would become Amber Dawn's new home, and she quickly rented a small 1-bedroom apartment, had a bedroom, a dining room, living room, and even a balcony. A great space for a young single girl with a couple of cats. The apartment was on the top floor with no neighbours above, only an attic, and even better, it was just 3 blocks from Amber Dawn's brother and sister-in-law's home, and that was one of the reasons that Amber Dawn had decided to move to the town. Now, she moved her belongings in, and after unpacking, she was happy to go to bed and no doubt exhausted from the move. Laying in bed, she tried to get to sleep. She thought she heard a noise. It sounded like footsteps. It actually sounded like it was coming from above her. But there was no apartment above her. It was her first night in the apartment alone and in a new town. So she dismissed the noise and she put it down to her imagination while she just became used to her new home. Eventually the noise stopped and she was able to get to sleep. She had noticed that there was a hatch in the ceiling. Now in Australia we would probably call this a manhole, and she assumed that this would lead to an attic. She asked her landlady if it was possible if anyone could be up there as a way of explaining these mysterious footsteps. She never checked it. The building manager and the landlady didn't either, and they dismissed her concerns as probably a squirrel or some raccoons. And to be fair, she didn't hear the footsteps again. She didn't think any more about the mysterious noise as she got used to the new town, and she was probably too busy to give it much thought anyway. Between her social life with her brother and sister-in-law, a job at an accountant's office and the local drugstore, as well as waitressing at night, she was a busy woman. Now things were about to get busier too, because Amber Dawn, an animal lover, decided to add a German Shepherd puppy to the mix as well. But she did notice other things, maybe not footsteps, but sometimes she would buy, say, a 6-pack of drinks. She might take a drink, but then another would be missing. Sometimes tins of soup would go missing. Her brother, that lived nearby, also had a key to the apartment, and Amber Dawn would often blame him for moving things around or taking food from her apartment when she was out. Now one night, when Amber Dawn was at work, something odd happened. She received a phone call from her landlady that the bathroom in her apartment had flooded. The water was so bad it was dripping into the neighbour's downstairs area. So Amber Dawn immediately rushed home. Not only was she worried about the flooding and the damage, but more importantly, her puppy was in the bathroom. Now, while her puppy was being toilet trained, she would leave her in the bathroom when she was out because although she was a German Shepherd, she was still only a very small puppy at this time and not properly toilet trained. So opening the bathroom door, she got a surprise. Water was everywhere, but her puppy was safe. She was sitting in the bathroom sink away from harm, and it seemed impossible how she could have got there. From the way the bathroom was set up and the fixtures, it seems that the puppy could not have climbed into the sink or made its way onto other furniture and got on it or jumped from the toilet. It was just too far away. It was a true mystery, but thankfully the puppy was safe, and that's all that mattered. And Amber Dawn convinced herself that the puppy had made its way safely on her own to that sink. Life continued on with Amber Dawn and her routine of work and home life. But that soon became disrupted when for the first time she changed her routine. She became so sick one day that she was unable to attend any of her jobs, and for the first time in 6 months since moving to the apartment, she called in sick to work. She stayed at home all day in the lounge room resting and trying to feel better. But at some stage later on in the night, she thought she heard a noise, but again, she dismissed it. She thought it must have been the cat and the puppy playing. And feeling like a bath would make her feel better, she decided that she would lay in the tub in the dark and try to relax and enjoy a warm soak. She leaned back in the tub, enjoying the water, while she looked at the ceiling in the dark. And that's when she noticed it. In just seconds, her mind processed what was going on. The missing food, the misplaced items, her puppy in the sink, the noises, it all made sense. The manhole hatch was open. She was not alone. If the person in the attic had opened the hatch, it meant that they were more than likely in the apartment. She hadn't left all day. No one had walked past her. She was naked in the bath, and from the layout of the apartment, there could only be one place where the intruder would be, in the bedroom closet. The problem was, in order to get out of the apartment, and that's what she really wanted to do, she would need to walk past the bedroom and the closet. I don't know how she did it. Her heart must have been going 10 to the dozen. But she very quietly got out of the bath. Carefully, she made her way to the bedroom. It was dark, but she found her robe and she was able to quietly walk to the kitchen. Her kitchen had a junk drawer, and in it, she took out the hammer that was in there. She wanted to be prepared just in case she had to use it. With hammer in one hand, she quickly dialed her brother's number. There was no cell phones back then. Her sister-in-law answered the phone, and Amber Dawn whispered down the line, "Someone's in the house." Her sister-in-law told her to get out now, and she promised that she would be straight there. Calmly, Amber Dawn left the house, still armed with the hammer and grabbing her puppy in her other hand, and it was just minutes before her sister-in-law, with her 2 German shepherds, pulled up in the car outside the apartment. They were too scared to go into the apartment, and they went back to the brother and sister-in-law's home and called the police from there. The police thankfully were quick to arrive. They entered the apartment, they gave it a thorough check, and no intruder was found. No one was inside. Then they checked the attic space. They confirmed what Amber Dawn knew already. Someone else had been living in her apartment unbeknown to her. They found a sleeping bag, some food, a book. This was all noted down in the police report. Amber Dawn returned the next day after spending the night at her brother's and her sister-in-law's. The intruder had gone, but there was no way that she could live there anymore. She didn't feel safe. She was able to use that fact that the police had reported that there was an intruder to break her lease, and she then moved from the apartment into her grandparents' home. She's never found out who the intruder was or how he entered her apartment or even why he chose that apartment, but she feels that it was probably just a crime of opportunity. Maybe he was homeless, or maybe he was a previous tenant that had never left and had a spare key. She wonders if he could have gained entry when she'd left the window open for her cats to come and go. Maybe he'd walked past, noticed it, and decided to go inside. But how did he know that there would be an attic and one that he could live in undetected? What did he do in the apartment all day when she was at work? Did he play with the puppy and feed it so it got to know him? Amber Dawn feels like it would have been a him, mainly because men are often taller than women and you would need to be tall to reach the manhole without a ladder. But of course it could be a woman. She often wonders if the Phrogger was someone she'd seen before. She recalled that there was once a red-headed, probably 30-year-old man that she had seen outside the apartment when she was going to the shops. She said he'd been sort of sitting there looking like he was waiting, and he looked at her for a long time. And she thought there was something really weird about the encounter and something odd. Maybe it was him, maybe not. And even though she'd armed herself with a hammer that night, Amber Dawn still feels certain that he didn't intend to harm her at all. She told This Is Criminal podcast that if he'd wanted to harm her, he had 6 months to do it. It just seems like he needed a place to stay, and it seemed he was at least kind to animals because he had kept her puppy safe. The only way her puppy could have gotten that sink was if someone had put her there. So clearly he was kind-hearted and maybe just down on his luck. And although the experience was clearly traumatic for Amber Dawn, forcing her to ensure that future properties always have the attic door locked, she still has a pretty good sense of humour about it. She told the Guardian newspaper that he was the best roommate ever. He kept to himself, he was quiet, and he always put the toilet seat down. So she now lives in Illinois with her husband and children and a menagerie of pets. She actually works with penguins. And the house that they live in, it doesn't have an attic. Now, in case you're wondering if this is just an off chance, it's not. Phroggers are common everywhere. They stay in attics, closets, crawl spaces, basements. And although it's not as common as break and enters or perhaps even squatters, they are still common, and in some cases Phroggers have lived with families and it's been horrific consequences. There was a movie in 2019 called I See You, which actually is about a Phrogger who torments a family, but there have been real life instances of it that are far too graphic for this channel. Even in Australia, we've had our share of Phroggers. In the state where I live in Queensland, in Rockhampton, there was a woman that noticed a few little odd things going on in her home, but she sort of thought it was maybe faulty security cameras, and she blamed the misplaced items that she noticed around the home on her children. And it wasn't until she came home from an appointment early that she found the TV on, the air conditioner on, and not only that, a half-cooked meal of chicken nuggets on the stove. While she'd been out, the Phrogger had been actually making himself at home, making food, watching telly, putting the air conditioner on. And the police discovered going around her home when they investigated, they actually found the same thing as Amber Dawn. There was a manhole in the ceiling, the cover was partially open, and someone had been living in the roof. And as you can expect, she felt totally violated. And just like many of us, the Queensland woman, Monica Green, she kept her schedule, a calendar, right there in her home. So the intruder just needed to look on the calendar and they would know when the family was away and when they were likely to be home so they could plan their cooking and their TV shows. And that's the thing, like, what are they doing in your home when they're not there? Do they mean to harm you? Do they mean to terrify you or scare you or torment you, or are they just people that have nowhere to live? The cost of living crisis in Australia at the moment is horrific, and there are people in tents every time I go and walk Buddy. There are people living in the cars, in the park, in tents. There are people living on the streets. I've never seen anything like it, like currently, for so many people that are homeless. And many of them are homeless and they have jobs, but there is nowhere for them to rent a property, or the property rental is just so far out of bounds that they can't afford to rent a property. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to hear more cases of frogging. And it's just not the average person that can have froggers in their home. Many celebrities have had froggers in their homes and in their guest houses. It's just unbelievable how many people will take up residence in someone else's property. In fact, there's actual websites that will tell you how to discover froggers in your home, but also to tell you how to frog and what places to look for. So I guess the moral of the story is, when you feel like that there might be some noises that you can't explain and things go bump in the night and you put it down to a family of possums living in your garage, maybe it's worth investigating. And it's not only in people's homes that people have been frogging. So in 2000, or in the early 2000s, there was an artist named Michael Townsend, and he decided to inspire his artwork. He wanted a really unusual place, and that was a mall, and he decided that it would be a great idea to live in a shopping centre, a shopping mall. So he actually built an apartment sort of unnoticed in the shopping centre in the car park area. And it wasn't just him, it was a few other artists as well that decided that they would build this apartment in the car park of a shopping centre. And they actually did this for about 4 years. They hid it behind some cinder block walls, and they had a utility door that sort of kept people out. And it can't have been that good, because they actually got broken into at some stage and someone stole their PlayStation. But they actually lived there for like 3 weeks of a month, and then they sort of take a week off and then go back. And they were sort of inspired by the people that they're seeing walking past and the people in the area. Now, one day this all sort of backfired when Townsend came out of the apartment and found 3 security guards there waiting for him, and he ended up pleading no contest to a trespassing charge that was filed against him. But still, he only received probation, and I mean, I guess he's got a really good story to tell. I mean, who lives in a car park of a shopping centre for 3 or 4 years? And this was not just a little apartment. This was a 750 square foot apartment that they built in the Rhode Island parking garage. So it seems unbelievable that you could go undetected for that long, but I guess that's the skill of a frogger. So when you're hearing those little bumps and noises in the night, make sure you take someone, investigate. It might not be the possums. It might not be any sort of critter. It might not be a frog. It might actually be a frogger. So on that note, I'm going to leave you with my finished picture here. Here is Mr. Frog. I did go over him again with some coloured pencils, the Prismacolor Scholars. So that's it from me. Until next time, stay safe and happy colouring.